Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session. I am very pleased to welcome you to the Center for Middle Eastern Studies and the CMES Middle East Forum for today's event, De-Development, Political Violence, Informal Control, the Kurds in Iran and Turkey. Our speakers, Ahmad Mohammadpour and Dilan Oçuoglu, come to us from Iran and Turkey, respectively. Dr. Mohammadpour is a socio-anthropologist from Eastern Kurdistan, Iran. He received his PhD in sociology from Shiraz University. He also has a PhD in cultural anthropology from the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. At present, he is an assistant professor in anthropology and sociology in the Department of Anthropology, Sociology, and Criminology at Troy University. Between 2014 and 2016, Dr. Mohammadpour was a visiting research professor in anthropology at Vanderbilt University. His research centers on the ethno-religious minorities and political economy of de-development in Iran, with a focus on Eastern Kurds. He has written 8 monographs and authored and co-authored over 60 academic articles in English, Kurdish, and Persian. His works on Kurdistan are widely considered models for ethnographic and grounded theory-based research in Iran. Dr. Mohammadpour's works have appeared in various international peer-reviewed journals, such as Current Anthropology, Postcolonial Studies, the British Journal of Sociology, Third World Quarterly, and the British Journal of Middle Eastern Studies, among many others. His most recent book, The Intellectual Roots of Internal Colonialism, will be published by Routledge this year. 2 other works entitled Colonialism at Home, The Intersections of Indigeneity and Coloniality in Iran, and The Geopolitics of Labor, Racialized Labor and State Violence in Iran are scheduled for publication next year.
Thank you very much. I am very grateful for this opportunity, Professor Sara Roy. It's such a great pleasure, and I am humbled and honored to be part of this great conversation with you and with Dilan, and also to share our knowledge and experience with the participants in this workshop. Thank you very much for hosting us. So I am going to basically start my conversation by sharing some slides if possible. So give me just 1 minute to share my screen with you. Yes, so here you go. So my topic of conversation, my discussion is about bordered and branded Kurds and state violence in Iran. I have to mention that this project, this basically conversation is for the most part, is basically part of a larger project that a joint or collaborative project with Dr. Kamal Soleimani. I wish we had him today in this workshop, but anyways, I am also representing him in this conversation. So it's basically a joint project, as well as based on 2 recent articles, one in Current Anthropology and the second one in Security Dialogue, in which we basically talk about the borderland and the politics of identity, as well as the development issue in Eastern Kurdistan. So I start my conversation with a very general, basically, overview of the region. Our project basically is on statelessness and minorities, as well as the dynamics of state violence in Iran. So as you know, Kurds are the largest stateless nation in the Middle East and North Africa, perhaps. And basically, they are always at the front line of the stateless violence in 4 sovereign ethno-nations, 4 sovereign states. One of the exceptionality of Kurdish question when it comes to the Kurdish studies or anthropology of Kurdistan, it is exactly the same thing, that the Kurdish people in each of these 4 states, they are at the same time dealing and facing the various forms of violence from 4 basically nation states at the same time. So part of my project is about the dynamics of state violence, assimilation, the population displacement, as well as the development. Basically, what we have done, basically, Dr. Soleimani and me, after publishing a dozen of articles and editorials on Eastern Kurdistan, in light of your research on Gaza Strip in 1987, if I'm correct, and then in 1995, was to redefine our project, was to re-articulate what we already published, and to basically put it, what you already published in the framework of the development studies. And your idea of the development, your concept of the development, which was basically developed to address the Gaza issue and the Israel-Palestine relationship, was very enlightening and very inspirational in many ways to our project. We found a lot of similarities, parallels, and some differences between these two cases. So in this conversation, I am going to focus on Eastern Kurdistan with some sort of occasional forays on your research on Gaza Strip. Okay. So when it comes to Eastern Kurdistan, we tend to put the Eastern Kurdistan's issues, the violence, state violence, basically the state policies with regard to not just Kurdish community, but all non-Persian ethno-nations. We tend to historicize them to put them in their historical, basically, context. Two historical moments are very important when it comes to the Eastern Kurds, and at the broader level to the non-Persian minorities. The first historical moment, give me 1 minute because it seems that I have a problem here with this screen. I'm sorry, just 1 moment. And okay, so two historical moments are very important. The first one is the establishment of modern nation state in Iran. I hesitate to use the modern nation state. I tend to use modern state because the state from the very beginning in 1925, it never represented the nation. It never represented the peoplehood or demos. Anyways, in 1925, we have a series of nationalist discourses basically emerging in the Middle East, one of which is Persian nationalism, or what is called later to be Iranian nationalism. These are, two concepts that are used interchangeably. So the Persian nationalism, or the modern state in Iran, was basically based on the idea of Aryan race theory. So there was an idea that there has been a pure blood historical agent called Persians, that they were fundamental and they were the sole author of the Iran's historical past and present. So this kind of Aryan race myth was in the first place formulated and articulated and then imposed by the Oriental scholars. Then based on the Aryan race theory, the modern state premised basically on three core concepts of the one nation, one country, and one language. In one word, the entire Iranian or Persian nationalism is in a sense based on the language supremacy and Persian language supremacy. So it is from there that we basically have this idea of territorial integrity and national identity. So the national identity in Iran basically is highly language-based. And it was after Islamic Republic that the national identity also includes the religion, which is Shiism, as another pillar of sovereignty. Okay, in 1979, we have a sort of shift from secular nationalism, even though that I don't believe that the previous regime, the Pahlavi dynasty, was totally secular. It has never been secular in a sense, but to take it that way anyways. So we have the shift from secular nationalism to religious nationalism. What 1979 revolution comes to the play is the element of Shiism as a second pillar of sovereignty. So when the sovereignty in Iran is based on the language, Persian language, and Shia religion, so it basically defines the demos, defines the peoplehood based on these two metrics. So the non-Persian and non-Shia people are branded as either not citizen or not citizen enough, that they should be assimilated, they should be civilized, or they should be punished for not being civilized, for not being assimilated fully. Okay, but during the Islamic Republic, which is our basically time of focus in terms of the research timeline in our project with Dr. Soleimani, we basically highlight the fact that under the Islamic Republic of Iran, it is true that the element of religion comes in, but the fundamental element, which is Persianism and Persian supremacy, remains intact. Okay, so in 1979, again, we have this shift from religious nationalism, from secular nationalism to religious nationalism. It is the time that the non-Persian and non-Shia minorities, such as Arabs, Kurds, and Baluchis, they are subjected to various forms of violence. But again, it depends on the affinity to the pillars of sovereignty. For example, when it comes to the Azeris, well, Azeris, they share basically a religion with the Persian ethnic group. So perhaps they are in the better situation in terms of their access to the economic mode of production, in terms of their access to the political power. But when it comes to the Arabs, Baluch, and Kurds, in my case, in my research, basically they are branded as other, both linguistically and religiously. And that should be also noted that the discrimination and the exclusion of non-Persians is constitutionally warranted. This is very interesting, that while the race and racism in the North America is practiced through skin and color, in the MENA region, it is practiced through language and religion. And one more difference that we found in our articles, basically with Dr. Soleimani, about the difference between the race and racism in these two parts of the world, is that while the race and racism, for example, in the context of the United States, is constitutionally rejected, yet institutionally practiced. But in the case of Iran, it is constitutionally warranted. That means that if you look at the Article 19 of the Iran Islamic Republic Constitution, you see that the people of Iran enjoy equal rights regardless of the tribe or ethnic group. So you see that how they equated the term tribe, ethnic group, race, and ethnicity all together, and how they presumed or assumed the existence of the local versus national, how they basically divided the peoplehood into different categories. But even if we take this conditional human right, let's say, article in Iran, it is also preceded by two other articles. Even this equality of Iranian people before the law is also conditioned by two other articles. In Article 12, it reads, Shiism is declared as an official religion. And in the Article 15, we have Farsi or Persian, so to speak, as the official and common language and script of the people of Iran. And who are the people of Iran? Basically, the very term of Iran, it did not exist before 1937 as a political entity. It was in 1937 that the term Iran became a replacement for the term Persia. So the very term Iran is a very nascent, is a modern concept. But you see that even when it comes to the people of Iran on the ground, Iran is the most ethnically diverse country in the Middle East, in which Persian ethnic group constitute only 60% of the Iran's population, and also the Shia, population constitute 70% of the Iran's population. So you see that neither the religion nor the language, they don't basically fit the multi-national and multilingual composition of the so-called Iran. Okay, So let's have a closer look at the Iranian Kurdistan or Eastern Kurdistan or Rojhelat. So Kurds in Iran, they basically inhabit in 4 provinces. Some of them, they were displaced to the northeast, as you see in the map. But the Kurds in Iran, they inhabit in 4 provinces of Western Azerbaijan, Kurdistan, Kermanshah, and Ilam. I don't take your time with this names and these details, but the population is estimated to be around 10 million. And as all the participants, perhaps they know that the issue is that the question of ethnicity in Iran is a highly securitized subject. We don't have the question of ethnicity in the official census. So we don't know, we don't have any reliable information about the Kurdish population or about the Arabs, so to speak, about the same thing about the Baluch or about the ethnic texture in Iran. What we have is just some estimations based on the, the provinces inhabited by those ethnic communities. The Kurdish people, they speak a Kurdish language, which has kind of a different syntax and alphabet from the Persian language. In terms of the religion, a majority of course in Iran, they are Sunni Muslim. You have some Shia Muslim in Kermanshah province and also other faiths such as Zoroastrians, such as Jewish, such as Christians in other parts of the Kurdistan. But Kurdish people, because of their ethnic and linguistic and religious background, religious difference with that of the official state, they have been at the front of any form of state violence over the last decade. Okay, so Rojhelat, which now has turned into a zone of security and into a sort of economic enclave, a segregated economic enclave, is not a poor country, is not a poor region. It is a land of plenty. It has a second largest forests in the entire Iran after the north of Iran. It has the second rain-fed farms and land after the north of Iran. It has the rank of the first to third rank in terms of agricultural products. It has the basically rich mineral deposits. For example, some deposits such as bitumen. It is the first in the entire Middle East, which is located in the Ilam province, which is a totally fully Kurdish inhabited province. And it has animal husbandry. So basically Kurdistan is not a land without a sort of resources. It's a land of plenty. However, after the 1979, in continuation with what the Kurdish people experienced under the previous regime, it has been subjected to various forms of violence and forms of de-development, basically. The first one is militarization. From 1980 to 1988, during Iran-Iraq war, the Kurdistan has been at the front of basically militarizing and securitizing policies in Iran. It was a war zone anyways, and also hundreds of garrisons and barracks, and also planting millions of landmines. Almost the entire Iran-Iraq border is dotted with around 16 million landmines left over from the Iran-Iraq war. They were never cleared out. And even the state began to cultivate more landmines to further securitize, to further militarize the Kurdish region. Many farms were turned into the garrisons, turned into the militaristic, basically, spaces, compounds. So it basically made some of the Kurdish, Iranian Kurdish borderland essentially inhabitable and depopulated because of the danger of landmines and also the militarization of the region. Another policy has been the demographic engineering by the indigenization, by making the Kurdish workforce to move to the non-Kurdish areas, and by bringing non-Kurdish personnel to Iranian, to Kurdish cities. So they contributed, they changed in a way, major cities such as Sanandaj, such as Mohammadpour, they have undergone a great deal of demographic engineering. Environmental degradation has been another thing. So environmental degradation in Eastern Kurdistan is not caused by the climate change. It is caused by the state. When state defines the minorities like Kurds into as a securitizing or securitized others and it turns their ecosystem into zone of security. So basically their ecosystem will become a zone of security. So over the last 10 years, for example, only in 2010, in the summer of 2010, basically, which is called the Black Summer, we had around 930 incidents of wildfire, all created by the state securitizing and militarizing institution in Kurdistan to make the Kurdish life impossible. This is exactly where basically the Sara Roy's idea of the development, to hinder the development, to hinder the future development, to block any possibility of development in the future, and to make the Kurdish habitat uninhabitable, unlivable. It has been one of those policies that we found very similar to what is going on in Gaza Strip. In our article, we talked about this issue in detail. And finally, the transference of resources, the Kurdish water supplies, even their soil, as well as other agricultural products, they are basically transferred to non-Kurdish region. One example that I really hate to mention in my conversation, but I don't help it, the Islamic Republic officials, they use the term Africa for Elam province, which is, I know, is derogatory, but I just want to draw your attention to this issue. While the Elam province hosts some of the minerals that are #1 at the countrywide, and some of them on the Middle East at large, basically, such as the bitumen, such as the gold ore mines. Still, in the rhetoric of the Islamic Republic officials, Elam is considered to be the Africa of Iran, which is also very telling. It tells us how colonialism in a non-Western context can be reproduced and can be, practiced. That's why that based on the scholarship of Latin America and Mexico, we use the term internal colonialism, a term that also was brought by some scholars of Palestinian studies to the study of the development in Gaza Strip. Okay, so in that part of my conversation, I will talk a little bit about my doctoral project. Some of this information that I offer here were published in a co-author article with Dr. Soleimani in the British Journal of Sociology. So in my doctoral project, I focus on Kurdish cross-border workers due to the decades of economic marginalization, decades of economic exclusion, and turning Kurdistan into a sort of segregated economic enclave. So now hundreds of Kurdish people, they were left with no choice but take their life to risk, put their life at risk, and engage in such an inhumane and cumbersome and dangerous job called kolberi. Kolberi is composed of two words. Kol means back or shoulder in Kurdish. Beri means carrying. So kolberi means simply, literally, it means carrying goods on one back or shoulder. It is exclusive in Eastern Kurdistan. Such a labor work, such a physical labor, hasn't been seen in no part of the world. Okay, so you see the people here. You see the one person who doing kolberi with one leg. So to show you what kolberi looks like, because many Western audience, they are not familiar with the kolberi, so I would like to take 2 minutes of your time to show a very short documentary of what kolberi looks like. So bear with me, sorry for this 2-minute documentary that was created by the BBC. So it helps us basically to further elaborate on the term.
Where I'm standing is the Iraqi Kurdistan border, a triangle between Iran, Iraq, and Turkey. Every day, hundreds of Iranian Kurds, young and old, cross the border to pick up a load of goods to carry back to Iran. But it's a long, dangerous, and difficult journey. These smugglers are from poor Kurdish towns and villages in Iran. I meet Khizr, a 70-year-old father of 5.
زن و بچه نو یک لقمه پیدا کنید. الان اومدین اونجا این دیستگر میزنم 100 تومان میدون به من.
100,000 تومان.
100 تومان میدن به من میبرم اونجا. از اونجا کریم ماتور کریم آشون اینا میدم برای من هفته 60,000 تومان میینه.
2 months ago, Khizr had a stroke. Now he has a tooth infection.
موظف بر عمل کنم. من الان میرم عملش میکنم میگه 150 میلیون تومان بده. پول ندارم برای کنم درست کنم.
They're challenging me if I can carry this load, so let's give it a try. He's 70 years old. I am almost half of his age. So let's see if I can carry it for okay. That is. Believe it or not, it's impossible even to take a step. Religion was always neglected.
Okay, so I would like to move on and talk a little bit about the demographics of Kolberi. The reason for Kolberi should be clear by now, based on this presentation and basically our conversation, how the language and religion basically becomes the pillar, because the defining feature of a nationhood or basically a demos. So those people who don't fit this definition of the nationhood or basically demos, they are considered inhumane or they are subjected to various forms of violence, chief among which here is the Kolberi. So the reason of Kolberi is simply goes down to this basically linguistic and religious differences, the way that the citizenship is defined in Iran, the way that the constitution defines the human right, what human we are talking about. The human that speaks Persian, the human that has a kind of human that has his religion or her religion is Shia. So these are the markers of the human rights in Iran, unfortunately. So the age of Kolberi, based on our study, it's getting, the average age is getting younger and younger. The minimum age is 10 years old, which means that many students, many underage Kolberis are engaged in such and underage students are basically engaged in such a cumbersome job. The maximum is 74. The average is estimated to be 29. Gender also, in terms of the gender, over the last few years, even the women were kind of forced to engage in this kind of job due to the lack of employment, due to the economic impoverishment. And in terms of the people engaged, almost around 200,000. This is the official report, basically the official data. So if we even take the official report, 200,000 Kolbers, if we assume that each person provides for a family of 5, we can assume that 1 million people, almost 10% of the Kurdish population, they live on this cumbersome job, occupation, basically. So here you see a woman who is doing Kolberi at the border. Okay, so I have 2 more slides, so don't worry, I will keep it shorter. So since 2015, we have been able to record the Kolber casualties at the border, thanks to the Kurdish Human Rights Organization network, KHRN, basically. They have been able to record the Kolber casualties on daily basis. So you see over the last 7 years, around 500 Kolbers have been either killed or injured by the state patrol. And if you look at, if you noticed in the documentary, the reporter said that these are smugglers. So to correct his point, the legal status of Kolberi is not clear. It is neither legal nor illegal. And this will open the state's hand to use the maximum violence against those people, because nowhere in the Constitution or in the labor law it is defined as illegal or illegal, and they don't intend to define the Kolbari as smuggling or something illegal. So that has been a sort of, opportunity for the state to be able to exercise its power at the borderland. Okay, so the reasons of the Kolbari incidents, the first reason is the direct shooting by state patrol. Over 800 of Kolbaris, they were killed directly by the state patrol. The second reason is landmine explosion. As I said, some of those Kolbaris, when they are running from the state patrol, when they are escaping, where they're trying to avoid ambushes, they end up walking into landmines. They get injured, they get killed, they get disabled. The third reason is missing. Well, Kolbari is a midnight job. It is a winter job, more or less. So because at those times, they think that the border patrol are not present at the border. So they will take a chance and they will go missing for days. So the fourth reason is freezing. Kurdistan is a highly mountainous and rocky region. In the middle of winter, when they go missing, they are found frozen to death. There has been moment in which 5 or 6 Kolbars, a group of Kolbars, were found dead because of freezing. And the fifth reason is falling from mountain. Some of the Kolbars were thrown off by the state patrol alive, and so basically they got executed by the state patrol. So it's not just falling off from the mountain. Some of them are thrown by the state patrol from the cliffs as a punishment. So drowning in the river, a heart attack under the heavy load. Some of those Kolbars, they are aged and they are old, and they can carry, like this guy in the documentary, they can carry like 200 kilos. So they have heart attack under heavy loads, and other factors that I don't want to take your time with this long list of factors. So finally, what Kolbari tells us about the Kurdistan, Kolbari and Kolbari life, and the life of Kolbaris in general, it is a microcosm of Kurdish life in Iran. It showcases how Kurdishness is treated and how Kurdish people are securitized and became the subject of the various forms of violence. So it is essentially a racialized labor. It is not just a simple smuggling. It's not a result of underdevelopment, as Sara Roy indicates in her book on Gaza Strip. Basically, when we talk about underdevelopment, when we talk about low development, we talk about a certain level of development. So a certain minimum level of development is still presumed. But the development is about hindering and blocking the developmental process to make the development impossible, unviable for the next generation. This is what's going on in Kurdistan to turn the Kurdish force. Some of those Kolbars, for example, they hold academic credentials. They are athletics, they are graduate students, there are PhD among those Kolbars. So you see that how the state, basically, how the Iranian state, through the strategy of Kolbarizing, let's say, turning Kurdish people into Kolbars, not only humiliate them, but also they contribute in, further impoverishing and the development of the region. So here you see that economy becomes a tool of collective punishment, collective securitization at the borderland. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation. I want to stop here, and I would love to talk about the other issues in Q&A section. Thank you very much.